Hello, and welcome to Where Did the Students Go? Housing and the School Enrollment Crisis. I'm Alison Cingolani, Director of Policy with SV at Home. Last month, the Council for Community and Economic Research Cost of Living Index found that the San Jose metropolitan area is the nation's third most expensive, behind only Manhattan and Honolulu, driven in large part by the high cost of housing. That means many workers can't live in the county whose economy they drive. It's also meant declines in school enrollment and school closures as families with young children leave the area for more affordable housing. And fewer people in Silicon Valley choose to have children because of the astronomical cost of living here. In California, most schools are funded on the basis of student enrollment, so fewer kids means less money to keep schools open. Many school boards across the state are having to consider closure plans, and state education leaders say that in many communities, school closures will ultimately be unavoidable. If these decisions are not made by local school boards in distressed districts, it could lead to fiscal meltdown, insolvency, and a state takeover, with an appointed state administrator deciding on school closures independently. Districts can cut costs by reducing programs or services, but they can only operate severely under-enrolled schools for so long before the situation becomes financially untenable because there are fixed costs associated with operating school sites, including maintenance, utilities, custodial services, and administration, as well as the need to maintain teaching staff to serve the full range of grade levels and student needs. On a per-student basis, under-enrolled schools are just more expensive to maintain. With the expiration of pandemic recovery funds and a stagnant state budget, half-empty schools are becoming increasingly untenable. Today, we'll look at SV at Home's original research on changing school enrollment in the 26 districts across Santa Clara County and why that matters so much for our communities. We'll put that in the larger context of the need for homes for families of all income levels to strengthen our school communities, and we'll look at how one district that's having to close schools is thinking about making sure their land continues to meet the needs of their local community. I want to acknowledge the really important contributions to this work of one of our summer housing justice interns, Logan Bellamy, who put in countless hours of work gathering data for this project. I also want to acknowledge that this is a continuation of original research SV at Home began in 2022, along with community partners Palo Alto Forward, that was generously funded by a grant from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation to examine the relationship between new housing, school district stability, and financial security. Before we dive into the research, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about our school systems overall. There are two types of public schools: traditional public school, which is probably the kind most of us grew up in, and charter schools. In Santa Clara County, most of our students go to traditional public schools, 74% of all students. Another 10% of students go to a different type of public school, a charter school. Charter schools are publicly funded and tuition-free schools of choice that operate with more autonomy and less oversight than traditional public schools, often with different educational programs and teaching approaches. They have more latitude in the operations and management of the school than traditional public schools, which allows for greater flexibility in curriculum, staffing, and operations. Some of our communities have more charter schools than others, but overall, the proportion of students enrolled in charter schools is fairly low. Finally, about 16% of students in Santa Clara County are enrolled in private schools. I want to note that the proportion of students enrolled in these three types of schools has remained pretty consistent over time, although private schools did pick up about 3 percentage points from traditional public schools during and following the pandemic, and charter schools picked up about 1 percentage point from traditional public schools around 2016. Next, I just want to clarify what we mean when we talk about elementary, middle, and high schools, because we're seeing different trends in enrollment among these different age groups. Elementary school consists of transitional kindergarten, which is generally 4-year-olds, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. Those are the elementary school years. Middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and high school is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So without further ado, here are our top-line enrollment numbers in Santa Clara County, and it's not pretty. We're looking at the cumulative enrollment decline in public school in the county, beginning in the 2014-2015 school year and running up to the aqua bar there, down the center of the chart. That's last school year, the most recent enrollment numbers available, with a loss to date of more than 45,000 students countywide. After the aqua bar, you're looking at enrollment projections from the California Department of Finance, showing that we're expecting a similar trend to continue happening in the years to come. A 20-year total enrollment decline of 36%, or nearly 73,000 fewer students. That's what we can expect if we're not able to make significant changes. That's pretty scary for a lot of reasons we'll talk about over the course of the program today. The overall trend in enrollment is determined by the rate of new students entering schools as existing students graduate or leave. The outmigration of families with young children and falling birth rates over time mean that families with more children are replaced by families with fewer children. We're seeing that very clearly in the pattern of enrollment declines across different age groups, with our elementary school students, that's TK through 5th grade, most impacted. What we're seeing now with our younger students is a sign of what's to come. As these smaller groups of elementary and middle school age children get older and move into high school, we can expect to see these larger enrollment drops moving up along with them. We'll talk in a few minutes about the reasons research is showing for our falling birth rate. Why are people having fewer children here now? Income pressures are also often higher for families with younger children, which can lead to displacement from high-cost areas like ours. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis shows that while families with young children have a wide income range with a notable disparity between the lowest and highest earners, families with older children generally have higher median incomes. In fact, the median income for families with young children is almost 20% lower than the median income for all families. Parents of younger children are earlier in their careers, leading to lower earnings, and families with younger children are less likely to have dual incomes. A Public Policy Institute analysis conducted last year shows that Santa Clara County experienced the largest drop in school enrollment among all 9 Bay Area counties over the last 10 years, as families left our high-cost area for more affordable inland cities and states. A lot of that income pressure is driven by rents. The market is not providing homes our young families can afford, and that's where affordable housing for families with lower incomes becomes so critical. Here, we're looking at who can afford the average rent in Santa Clara County based on the average wage for some of the key jobs that form the foundation of our economy. It's clear that a lot of the people our communities rely on can't afford to live here. You can see that a renter earning minimum wage would need to work almost 4 full-time jobs to afford average rent in the county. For those keeping score, that's not actually possible. As people are pushed out by the high cost of housing, we face worker shortages in childcare, our grocery stores, favorite restaurants and small businesses, our doctor's offices, and also declining enrollment in our schools. We know that families with young children are being pushed out of the area by high costs, driven in large part by the high cost of housing. But we're also seeing families having fewer children. While this is happening on a national basis, it's more dramatic in high-cost areas like ours. Why? There is plenty of research from a wide variety of sources that shows how close the connection is between the high cost of living, and specifically of housing, to decisions about having children. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research finds that rising home values have a negative impact on birth rates because they represent, on average, the largest component of the cost of raising a child, larger than food, childcare, or education. This implies that when the price of housing rises, the price of having children also rises. This price increase leads couples to delay childbearing or to have fewer children altogether. A study published in the Journal of Public Economics found that a $10,000 increase in home prices leads to a 2.4% decrease in birth rates among renters. Changes in house prices exert a larger effect on current period birth rates than changes in unemployment rates. According to a report by conservative think tank Institute for Family Studies, housing costs were among the top factors preventing men and women under the age of 35 from having as many kids as they desired, outweighing childcare costs, work schedules, job stability, student debt, healthcare access, paid leave, desire for leisure time, personal health, and every other factor, with the exception of infertility, lack of a partner, or a desire to finish higher education. There are many reasons why someone might choose not to have children, but a 2024 survey by the Pew Research Center asking adults ages 18 to 39 who don't have children why found that 41% say it's because they can't afford to have a child. Why? In Santa Clara County, a family of two would need to increase their income by 52% for a total of $148,600 per year to maintain their standard of living after having their first child, according to an analysis of data from the Economic Policy Institute. This is driven by both the cost of housing and of childcare, which can cost more than $31,000 annually for an infant as of 2024. This matters because birth rates are lower in areas where raising children takes a bigger share of a family's income, as the chart on the left shows. The latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed that the United States reached its lowest fertility rate in history in 2024. The average American woman is now estimated to have 1.6 children during their lifetime, much lower than the 2.1 rate needed to keep population at its current level without immigration. Let's take a look at enrollment changes across the three different types of schools. We sometimes hear a narrative that families are moving students from traditional public to charter and private schools, but we can see here that's really not what's happening. We simply have fewer children enrolled in school. We're seeing a modest 5% gain in enrollment in private schools from 2014 to 2025, but remember we don't have very many students enrolled in private schools to begin with, so that is only a gain of a couple thousand students. At the same time, we've lost almost as many students from charter schools, and more than 43,000 students from traditional public schools, where most students are enrolled. That line of the chart representing traditional public schools is thicker to remind us of how many more students are enrolled there. We're focusing now on enrollment changes in our traditional public schools at the elementary level, since that's where we're seeing the most alarming declines. So where in the county are these enrollment declines coming from? Really, almost everywhere. North, east, and west, although it's generally a little better in South County, where housing costs are a little more affordable, and Morgan Hill and Gilroy have done a great job of not only adding a lot of new housing, but a lot of new affordable and family housing. We have some cities in the northern part of the county that have also done a great job of adding housing, like Milpitas and Mountain View, but a handful of cities can't do it alone. It's going to take more housing affordable to young families in every community to make this work. Are we seeing greater declines in low-income communities? Here's where we're using the percentage of students eligible for free or reduced lunch as a proxy for income in different school districts. Children are eligible for free or reduced price school meals if their household income is at or below 130% of the federal poverty guidelines for free meals, or between 130 and 185% of the guidelines for reduced priced meals. They're also eligible if the child is in a household that receives benefits from CalFresh or CalWorks, or if they're in foster care, unhoused, or part of the Head Start program. In Santa Clara County, 37% of students are eligible, so districts close to that average have a light color in the right column, with red being higher and green being lower than average. So you can see we're really seeing enrollment declines across the full range of communities by wealth. But even though we're seeing relatively high-income school districts have steep enrollment declines, the outcomes of low enrollment can be very different because of the way schools are funded in California. One example is Los Altos Elementary District and Alum Rock Union Elementary District, both in the upper third of the table. Although their cumulative enrollment declines are neck and neck at 30% and 31%, the wealthier Los Altos Elementary has not had to close any schools, while Alum Rock Union has had to close 6 schools and merge another 6 over the last 10 years. So here's the difference. The first source of funding for California public school districts is local property taxes, although they also receive funding from a variety of federal, state, and local sources. The state uses the Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF, to determine the minimum amount of funding per student for each public school based on the demographic profile of the students they serve. This serves as a floor for per student funding, but there's really no ceiling. For most school districts in our state, local property taxes don't fully cover the LCFF guarantee, so the state funds the shortfall to ensure the district receives its minimum allocation. In about 10% of districts in the state, local property taxes exceed the LCFF guarantee. These districts are referred to usually as basic aid or sometimes excess tax districts, and they get to keep the property taxes above the LCFF guarantee, increasing their funding per student, sometimes well above the LCFF guarantee. In Santa Clara County, about half of the public school districts produce enough funding from property taxes to be basic aid districts, and will probably have more ability to weather declining enrollment. For folks who are paying attention here, no, that's not a very equitable way to fund something as core to the success of future generations as education. And declining school enrollment, even in wealthier communities that are not having to close schools, is still disruptive to classrooms. Children are losing the social connections with longtime friends whose families are being pushed out. Teachers and staff in these communities face long commutes to housing they can afford, or may frequently turn over as they find job opportunities closer to home. What do these declines in enrollment mean for the greater community? An analysis from the joint venture Silicon Valley Institute of Regional Studies a couple of years ago shows some of the broader economic impacts of the loss of families demonstrated by enrollment declines, such as losses in employment, labor income, output, and spending. Families form the backbone of thriving communities. Their presence positively affects city infrastructure, local economies, and overall quality of life. Along with property tax payments, young families contribute to the economy by spending on housing, groceries, childcare, healthcare, recreation, and education. They create demand for family-oriented goods and services, which helps generate stable jobs in sectors like education, healthcare, retail, and hospitality. By participating in local events, volunteering, and connecting with their neighbors, young families help create lively communities. This kind of engagement fosters a sense of belonging and helps strengthen cities' social fabric. Young families also help cities maintain or increase their population, which can counter urban shrinkage and decline. They're important advocates for high-quality public services like schools, parks, and libraries, and recreational amenities such as swimming pools and playing fields. Families often also advocate for features that promote healthy living and for cleaner environments with lower pollution levels and reduced traffic congestion. Neighborhoods with young families tend to have lower crime rates due to parents' investment in their children's safety and well-being. So, with all of these benefits, clearly, we need to make it easier for families to stay and thrive here. Because what happens if we can't slow enrollment declines is school closure. Santa Clara County has lost at least 5 charter schools and 22 traditional public schools just since 2018. Every one of these schools represents a whole community disrupted. These school closures have real and deep consequences for children. Research from the Annenberg Institute at Brown University shows us that students who attend a school that closes during their K-12 career have lower test scores, along with worse attendance and behavior in the short term. In the long term, they're less likely than their peers to complete college and have a job, and their earnings tend to be lower. These impacts are particularly pronounced among students in secondary education, Hispanic students, and those from originally low-performing schools and economically disadvantaged families. School closures in Santa Clara County are most likely to hit districts with a low percentage of white students, just 1.4 to 12.4% countywide, and a high proportion of Latino and/or Asian students. Students with disabilities are especially vulnerable to the educational harms associated with school closings, as the processes required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act for evaluating and supporting their unique educational needs may be disrupted. In many low-income communities, neighborhood schools are also long-standing anchors and support systems. Closing neighborhood schools can disrupt and further destabilize communities that are already burdened with other forms of instability. So, how can we help stabilize communities and make it easier for families with young children to live here and thrive? More housing that's accessible and affordable for young families is critical for the well being of both children and schools. Housing instability, such as eviction or even frequent moves, makes it hard for children to learn. Two or more school changes between grades 4 and 8 leads to a significant decrease in the likelihood of graduation, separate from the effects of poverty. Eviction filings reduce school attendance for as much as 2 years following the eviction, and one study of a cohort of 9-year-olds showed that an eviction in the previous year was associated with performing a full year behind on measures of memory, math, and vocabulary. In addition, poor housing conditions of any kind, such as leaking roofs, mold, noise, and overcrowding, affect educational outcomes for multiple reasons. They affect children's health, they increase parental stress, and they leave students without places to focus on schoolwork. Poor housing quality, separate from affordability or instability, is associated with more behavioral challenges for younger children and lower scores on standardized achievement tests for older children. Widespread housing instability affecting large portions of students will, in turn, affect the schools they attend or have attended. Schools, for better and worse, absolutely affect families' decisions to move to or stay in a neighborhood and what it costs to do so. So, this is how we strengthen our communities. Safe, stable, healthy, and affordable housing sets kids up for learning and allows schools to be able to focus on what they do best. And strong, supported schools with the resources they need can be anchors for communities both during the school day and outside of it. On our website, you'll find a web page with analysis of elementary school enrollment changes in every school district in the county. Right now, we're going to take a look at Alum Rock Union Elementary School District as an example of a district that's been hit really hard by declining enrollment and has had to close more schools since 2018 than any other district in the county. This was my children's elementary school district and is still the community I live in, so it's near and dear to my heart. The ARUSD student population is 80% Latino and 12% Asian, with large proportions of Vietnamese and Filipino students, and a high population of English language learners. 76% of students qualify for free or reduced lunch, the second highest proportion of any district in the county. This is a culturally vibrant community that has strong social and faith networks and hundreds of small local neighborhood serving businesses, but it's historically been redlined and disinvested, and so property values here are lower than in some other parts of the county. And remember, that's how schools are funded. The Alum Rock Union School District has had to close 6 of its 21 elementary and middle schools, while merging 6 others down into 3. These are heartbreaking decisions that have been really difficult for the community. Classrooms of kids that have gone to school together for years are now in separate schools. Teachers have been moved to different campuses, and kids may not have a neighborhood school anymore, which creates challenges for families for transportation. The district has worked hard to involve the community in its decision making and cushion that blow, but it's a tough thing to have to navigate. Now the district has a lot of land that has previously served families and the community with school sites, and they're doing some really amazing things to look for ways that that land can continue to serve the community's needs. They've partnered with Head Start in the Santa Clara County Office of Education to open 2 early learning centers at the San Antonio and Cassell Elementary School sites that serve toddlers and preschool-age children, bringing revenues into the district that allow that facility to stay open and continue to add value to the community while also preparing children to succeed in school. In an effort to attract and retain teachers and school staff in our high-cost area, the district is in the process of permitting education workforce housing on the site of Masson Middle School, where teachers and school staff can live at rents they can afford. Also at the Masson site, the district is in negotiations with our local nonprofit partners, Mayfair Neighborhood Trust, which is a community-led effort co-founded by Somos Mayfair and the School of Arts and Culture at Mexican Heritage Plaza, to prevent displacement and ensure development in East San Jose reflects community priorities. The Mayfair Neighborhood Trust is preparing to develop and rebuild a really robust and multifaceted community center where the Mexican American Community Services Agency, or MACSA, operated a beautiful community serving youth center on district land. The original building, abandoned for more than 2 decades, once provided multiple, strong lines of service, including senior, youth, family, mental health, and educational services. Now it's envisioned to strengthen and adapt that legacy by providing really valuable space for education, culture, sports, and community services in a historically underserved neighborhood. The City of San Jose has already committed $500,000 in funding to support the effort, and the Mayfair Neighborhood Trust is working to develop a range of other sources of funding to support that redevelopment. For a long time, the narrative about housing and school enrollment was that more housing will create financial pressures on school districts. Instead, we've seen that reality is the opposite. We need housing everywhere in all our communities that is accessible and affordable to help relieve financial pressures for young families so they can stay rooted and thrive here. I want to be clear. We know that this is not something that will happen overnight. And with costs in the South Bay continuing to rise, school enrollment is likely going to get worse before it can get better. But we must make the investment in affordable housing if we want tomorrow to look different. In the meantime, we also need to work to help our school communities envision what is possible for sites where they've had to close schools, that this land can continue to advance the mission of school districts to serve and strengthen their communities, acting as a powerful anchor in challenging times to help keep communities intact. What's possible includes both affordable housing for our education workforce and for families, along with a range of uses that meet the community's needs: childcare and early learning centers, parks and open space, community services, and more. So our call to action today is to take action to help rebuild Moxa in support of the Mayfair Neighborhood Trust, a community-led effort co-founded by Somos and the School of Arts and Culture to prevent displacement and ensure development in East San Jose reflects community priorities. I encourage you to scan the QR code on the screen, which will take you to a webpage where you can donate and stay up to date on what's happening with the former Moxa site as the Mayfair Neighborhood Trust and Alum Rock School District continue to work to move this important development forward. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we invite you to stay in touch with us and check out the many resources we have available at siliconvalleyathome.org.